Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today I'm going to provide an overview for Memnon's faction in the upcoming Total War Troy, Rhesus and Memnon DLC. And as the ruler of Ethiopia, Memnon is far away from home, as he will start on the island of Rhodes in the southeastern part of the map. And the initial goal of his campaign is to raise his way through the islands of Rhodes, down to the island of Crete, and into the Greece mainland. And as we can see from Memnon's victory conditions, his Homeric victory will require you to complete his 13-step epic mission chain, and also raise the settlement of Mycena and Penteleon. And Mycena, of course, is the capital of Agamemnon's faction, the leader of the Greeks, and Penteleon is the capital of Achilles' faction. And the reason is Achilles is said to have killed Memnon in a duel in the Iliad, so it's a bit of a revenge tour for Memnon as well. And unlocking all the Pharaoh's servant territory is also an additional requirement. This is obviously a faction unique mechanic that we'll cover very soon, and this is mainly due to the fact that Ethiopia at this time is part of a vassalage to the Egyptian, therefore that's why everyone is the Pharaoh's servant. Looking at the Total War victory conditions, we have to defeat the antagonist faction, and as with the previous Horde faction, Penthesilea, which is why this artwork currently is still Penthesilia's artwork. This is a placeholder. We're currently development in progress, so you'll see a new art when the game launches, but we have to also raise 80 territories and the 4 major cities listed here. And aside from these victory conditions, there are a ton of unique faction mechanics. First and foremost, we are a Horde faction. This means a lot of the shared Horde mechanics are applied to us as well. Things like ore spoil, not being able to have any settlements, roam around and being able to recruit anywhere, and also the inability to reinforce each other, as that is not allowed for Horde factions. Then, in terms of faction unique mechanic, we have the before mentioned Pharaoh's servant. This allows us to recruit without buildings even in our camp. We will call on reinforcements from the territories in Egypt, Ethiopia, Canaan, and Susa, and we can actually stack these reinforcements inside our special recruitment pool until we have enough to summon a full army in a single turn if we want to. And this way we can ramp up our power very rapidly using this special mechanic. And we have to also unlock new territories within each of these regions for stronger units, and we'll talk about what's the requirement for these unlock. As we have seen in the victory condition, we have to unlock all 6 territories that are not given to us at the beginning. Aside from this Pharaoh's servant mechanic, we also have the Resourceful Strategist, and like Rhesus, Memnon also will not have access to the traditional spy, envoy, and priestess agents. This sort of has to do with just this theme of this DLC, and also the fact that these two factions are not Aegean or Trojan, and in their place what we have are camp followers, and there's actually a ton of camp followers we can assign. These are replacement passive agent that act sort of as embedded agent even though they don't take an embedded spot, and this way they can provide a lot of different benefits to the army. And since we are a Horde faction that cannot reinforce or be reinforced, a lot of these actions are actually quite powerful in terms of what they can compensate in battle. And we'll take a look at all the resourceful strategies available to us once we get in game. But before we do that, there's still the playstyle and the army restrictions. So the playstyle is mostly about quick, lightly armored warriors that have special means to survive into the late stages of the battle. At the very end of this video, we'll be doing an overview of all the 22 unique units introduced for Memnon's roster, so we'll take a deeper look at what those abilities are. In terms of hero restrictions, we have no access to defenders. Makes a lot of sense because we can't hold territories as a Horde faction, therefore there's really no point to recruit defenders. Once again, we'll have 22 entirely unique units, so there's really no point to look at these 3 sample here. We'll be looking at them in its entirety at the end of the video. And for the lineage character bonus, we have 10% campaign movement for our own army, as well as 5% construction cost discount for Horde buildings, as each army essentially represent a camp, and there are buildings for each army, and that's why we have camp followers. So with all this said, let's jump into game, take a look at our start position, and take a deeper look at our faction mechanic, and let's uphold our vows to our kins in Troy.
O bronze-armed Memnon, your distant kin in Ilion have roused the anger of the mighty Achaean warlords.
Brother, your foolish passion has doomed us.
And so you have sailed out, the spear tip of a mighty host blessed by divine Pharaoh, on a mission to aid exquisite Troy in the face of looming ruin.
I stand loyal to my kinsmen. My shield will shelter the people of Troy.
But be wary, for Rhodes does not take kindly to allies of Priam, and even now muster their forces for battle against you. Farther west, Idomeneus, king of Crete, will interpose his might ahead of you in the great theater of war between Achaeans and your Trojan kin. Take heart, great Memnon, for you are blessed by the dawn, and girded for war by Pharaoh himself. Your victory is assured.
Alrighty, that's our flyby intro. And of course, our first mission is to take care of the army in front of us, nothing to really look at. And these symbols are war spoils. They'll grant us resource when we take them. And of course, this resources will come back after quite a long time actually. So you will always have some war spoil to go after. And this is your really only reliable way of gaining resources as a Horde faction. Now, the first thing we have to talk about is our unique mechanic, the Pharaoh's Servant. This is how we get our units. And if we pull up this map, you can see the 4 distinct regions with the 6 unlockable regions that can add on to our recruitment pool. And from each existing region that we have access to, we can recruit troops. And once we do want to call on their reinforcements, all the other regions will enter a cooldown period of just 1 turn. It's very quick. And what you do when you do call for reinforcements is you will add +1 and +2 to your current special recruitment pool, which you can call out onto the field at any time. Calling reinforcement is free. So for example, if we want these units, we'll get 1 of the Egyptian slingers and 2 of the Nephra infantry. And immediately everything goes on a 1 turn cooldown. And then those units will pop into our special recruitment pool. 1 of these, 2 of these, and you can see we can hold up to 4 of them. We don't have to put them in our army right away. We can keep putting them into this special recruitment every other turn, depending on the cooldown. Some regions going to have longer cooldown than others. And when we want to, we'll add them over. And you might have noticed, units are free for us. There is no cost, but there is an upkeep. So be mindful of that. Also, administrative burden is not really a thing for us. This does not apply to Horde factions, so we don't have to really worry about it. We have our own camp with our own buildings, which we'll look at a bit later. But essentially, these regions will dictate what armies we can have. Obviously, the later unlock would have better units, and the way we can unlock these depend on the new reform and building mechanics. For our royal decree, we have a very different tree. As you can see here under food, we have Pharaoh's gesture, reducing the cost of Egyptian units, leading to an unlock of more regions in Egypt and additional camp followers, which are also tied to the regions around the map. And then over here, loyalty to the king gives us discount to Ethiopian units, and then unlock for more Ethiopia regions. And then over here under stone, we have the K9 with more camp followers and more territory, as well as reduction of cost. Then in bronze, we have from Asia. So this is Susa as well as K9, I believe. And then there's the Africa region as well. Susa is unlocked right here. And this is upkeep for all units. This is a very different looking royal decree tree than most factions. You can see you can also increase the number of units you can get from the African regions You can take your time to explore this, and we'll definitely do a guide on this to see what's optimal, especially if we end up playing as Memnon. There'll be a poll out for the community post page for people to vote on before the game launches on December 14th. But for the time being, just know that this is one way to unlock most of the region. But in addition to royal decrees, some of that requires your building in your camp. So a quick look here. In each camp, there are 9 building slots. Obviously 10 if you include the main tent. And this tent, as you can see, will unlock the Egyptian territory of Memphis. So this is another way to unlock one of your regions. Then beyond that, if we want to gain divine favor, we have access to the altars just like the regular game. And of course, we can only build one altar. So that's one building slot out of the way. And then if we do a little bit of math here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. One too many. And that's okay, because first, if you end up playing the historical mode, then this building chain is gone, because this increases mythical unit recruitment. When you raise a settlement that has a special mythical unit icon, whether you're playing Truth Behind the Myth or you're playing the Mythos DLC, you will gain access to the recruitment. That's how Horde armies work, because we cannot build the unique recruitment building for them. And this building will increase how many you will get, right? But if you're playing historical mode, this building is gone, and you can build basically one copy of every single one of your building, and that's pretty much your tent. So there's really no need to strategize anything. But if you are playing on Truth Behind the Myth or the Mythos DLC and you want to have this extra recruitment, then in the late game, I think this building here is the one you can get rid of to add this later on, because this building increases your royal decree efficiency, and by the late game, the bonus is really not useful. Think about this as a placeholder for this. By the time you can switch, the discount to all buildings will pretty much be done, because you would have built everything already, hopefully. And then you can swap over to this and have your full tent set up perfectly. And that's the unique buildings. I'm not going to take too much time to look at these bonuses. Most of these are combat oriented, army oriented, because that makes sense since this is a mobile army situation. And none of them will unlock units, because all the units are coming from reinforcement zones. And beyond that, we have our camp follower mechanic, which is called Resourceful Strategist. These are camp followers we can attach to individual armies. You can see the army icon top. If we had more armies, they will have more icons on top, and the followers will be in each camp. I think you can duplicate, so each camp will have their own sheet, basically. You can have one of each. There is no limitation here, and they cost a certain amount to recruit into your camp. If there's no icon above the circle, that means they provide a default passive bonus that you will always have. You could lose the camp followers if you lose the army. Then you have to reset and re-recruit them, cost more money. Quite sad. But as you can see, these camp followers are also divided into region. The one that needs unlocking basically is missing the royal decree that unlocks the region, and then you get all the rest of the Egyptian camp followers. The active ones, the active ability will carry a pre-battle ability where you can spend gold to activate certain bonuses. So for example, if we have the Lotus Merchant in our army before battle, we have the option to pay 80 to perform an action. And this action is to disable all enemy towers in a major settlement siege battle. This is very strong, but the reason why we have this is because we cannot reinforce our armies. We don't have access to spies. So a lot of the traditional method to help us defeat and overcome tough sieges are not available to us. Therefore, there's this action that can help us shut down towers. In addition to that, we can start the battle with the enemy hero at half health. This is sort of a spy action, Egyptian assassin. And then Outrider Scouts allow us to see all enemy units in any battle. Master Tactician can force the enemy to sally out of a siege. So they have to fight you in the field, along with the garrison, of course. So it depends on what you want in terms of you want to siege them while they're inside, or you actually want to fight them in an open field fight. I guess it will depend on your army composition. And then finally, This one will force the enemy army to start out tired on the battlefield, and this one will cost food. And this is actually quite strong since tired will reduce morale, reduce melee attack and melee defense is quite useful. And then the passive boost is like post-battle income, increased chance to get spoils like items from generals after a fight, decreased siege time, decreased chance of getting hit by enemy agents because although we have no agents, the enemy will still have agents. Reduce the range of enemy army movement when they're in the same region, increase or decrease enemy morale, plus our movement at sea, increase our growth rate, which is actually quite useful to build up our camp, more movement for us, more morale for us, increasing the favor per turn. So this is actually pretty key because if you have multiple armies at the end, this perhaps would be the servant of divine that you add to every army, build an altar for them to help you maintain basically eventually potentially every single divine favor because you could have a lot of armies since you don't have administrative burden to worry about. When sieging major settlements, grants action to disable enemy tower, we already covered that. Upkeep, plus experience for all units every turn, and some extra replenishment even on, enemy territory, which doesn't really matter for us because we're horde anyways. So it's 5% anyways increase, and then 3% just to hero. And that's the Resourceful Strategist. Nothing too deep here because you can get every single one. It's just a matter of cost, and the bonuses are quite useful. Alrighty, so with that, we pretty much introduced Memnon's faction. It's not super deep. I think the fun is getting the units, storing them correctly, using the cooldowns and getting the unlock, and building out different combination of armies to use, and the rest as a horde faction, it just means war. There's no way around it. You need to get your war spoils, and that's how you can survive and help out your kins in Troy. So with that, we're going to jump over to a custom battle and take a look at all 22 new units from the far east and south and see how they perform here in Troy. Alrighty, so once again we have a long line of units to go through, and we order them pretty much by type instead of by region because it's actually more important to see how they perform, and you can find what region they're from the in-game panel. Starting things off, we have Memnon himself. This is from Truth Behind the Myth. He looks quite cool. This Egyptian style sword is just one of my favorite. Grew up really liking the Mummy movie, so this is a treat. Obviously, the skill would depend on the skill tree, which we will have a separate skill guide for in the future. So let's quickly just look through the units because I think his stats not that relevant, especially if you give him a chariot or not. If you're playing on historical mode, he will have bodyguard units. They will be infantry unit. I believe you actually end up getting, I could try to find them. Yeah, the Sheridan Warriors would be your bodyguard unit. All right. Kicking things off, we have our fellow Ethiopian tribemen, and judging by their lack of armor, we can say that they're just a light infantry using sort of a hammer weapon. No armor whatsoever, essentially 10 armor here. They are shielded with a very basic shield, probably leather, 35% here. And we have 40 points of morale, not super high, but they are super fast, 55. That is actually super good speed. You can compare them with, say, chariots. Some of the heavy chariots are about 68 speed. So as the infantry, these are very fast units. Good attack, bad defense, decent damage, nothing too high here. Not very good charge bonus. I think chasing down range is kind of their job. They do have Vanguard deployment, but nothing special about them. They're basically your cheap end infantry option. Then moving on, we have the spear version. These have Leader's Will. This is a new ability that will grant increased morale to self for 20 seconds. There is a 240 second cooldown, but unlimited usage. This is kind of in the clutch situation when you see your unit almost routing. You could save yourself a little bit with this 20 points morale. It's only good for yourself. Once again, same setup, no armor, kind of low morale, very good speed. These obviously will have bonus against large. Unfortunately, only 7 points, so the game deems their spear a little bit rustic. As we have seen for Rhesus units, those spears would have 10 points of bonus against large. Charge bonus not so high. We also have Vanguard deployment. Then moving on to more Egyptian units, Nephra infantry. these are slightly better armored somehow. Visually, I cannot tell, but we're gonna just believe that. They have the ability to swap weapons. As you can see, there is a secondary weapon on their back. It's an axe. So they have two different forms, whether with the spear or with the axe. They will have their shield 40%, so they just have slightly better defensive stats compared to the Ethiopian options, and they actually specialize in defense with the melee defense aspect, opposite of what we saw earlier, and their melee attack's actually quite weak. They have much slower speed. They're sort of your cheap and defensive frontline unit meant to stop people, even though quite worry about their actual defensive stats.
Very well.
Alright, Philistine Swordsmen, finally some sturdier units with 35 armor. They have a bigger shield, but still only blocks 40%, same as the Egyptian units there. 55 morale, finally some higher morale numbers, decent speed, a little bit low on the melee attack, but they're more of a defensive unit, and as you can see, flanking defense is improved.
To battle!
Then we have Chariot Runners. As their name suggests, they are fast, excellent battle speed, and they actually have great morale compared to the low-end spear units we saw from Ethiopia. We have 30 morale here, or 30 armor here, 60 morale. Morale is very high, good speed, 55, good attack, or I guess decent attack, decent melee defense. Compared to everything we saw so far, these are decent numbers, I guess. Bonus against large, and that is only going to give us 52. What? These are chariot killers. And monster killers. I'm very suspicious if this is not a typo, because we're still in, you know, we're basically still in alpha or beta, I guess. We're basically pre-launch. This number doesn't look right. 52 bonus against large. Then they would be like the Mythos monster killers, chariot killers too. I mean, you see this dismantle ability as well. Basically, we target an enemy within 5 meters of us for 20 seconds, and cannot target if the unit's not a chariot. So basically, their chariot runner, they run after the chariot, and then they would basically dismantle them, lower their speed by 60%, lower their melee defense by 50%, and then they're large and they do extra 52 damage. I mean, thematically, it's right. Just the number is so high. But that would be pretty crazy. So these guys are chariot destroyers. Very niche and very cool.
We stand ready.
Then we have the Hoopshoe, and these are medium frontline units using axe and shield. The shield is good for 60%. Finally, some good shield, even though visually they look the same as the shield over here. But that's a different story. We have 45 armor, 60 morale, slow speed, but these are definitely the sturdier, tankier unit. Melee defense higher than melee attack, kind of signify that. We have armor piercing damage because of the axe, almost no charge bonus. Good frontline axe infantry, essentially.
Warriors of Egypt.
Then we have manfight infantry. These are, once again, a light spear unit. They have a shield, 60%, so the shield's quality is getting better and better. Armor's not really picking it up. Good morale, good speed, so these are just the slightly higher quality, and they also can swap weapons, and I think the weapon they can swap is once again an axe, which is on their back. Oh, a big battle axe. So this is a two-hander axe, also very Egyptian in style. I actually wonder if we can see the damage. Yeah, there we go.
Spears.
So with the axe, they have a bonus against large of 10 points, which is a much more reasonable number than what we saw earlier. And it's going to be heavily armor piercing. Better charge with the axe compared to the shield and spear. The shield goes on the back. He didn't get the memo to switch weapons. There we go. But they become much more aggressive frontline charge unit. You can see the change on the number. And now they have rear shield defense. So the shield deflection goes behind their back, which means if enemies shoot, they can protect themselves. It's just for the same for all units that can swap weapons with shields. Then we have the Itjet Staff Bearer. Once again, another low armor unit with high morale this time. Very good speed. A lot of very fast infantry options. Very good melee attack, very good melee defense, decent damage, and once again we see Leader's Will. They can boost their morale when in danger. This only works by them on themselves. They also have Vanguard deployment, good charge. These guys can actually pack a punch charging in, I believe. The armor is an issue for most of the roster. Then we have Hinku Guards. These have armor, finally, 65%. 65% range block chance on the shield as well. Very good morale, much slower, that's fine. Good armor melee defense. Very high damage, and flank defense improved as well. So this would be probably the sturdiest frontline unit we have seen so far, with very good damage as well.
Spears!
Then we have the Noctu infantry, and these also can swap weapons. I believe they're also the two-handed axe. We can just see it real quick. Yep. And the damage shoots way up, and they have bonus against axe swords. You can see it right here. Against large 15, against swordsman 10, against axemen 10. Damage shoots up, defense drop a little. The shield goes on their back. They have flank attack improved. They're the charge unit here. They have very good speed that improves when you switch the axe. And if we drop back to the spear, the speed drops to 48. The armor doesn't change, I believe. Yeah, the armor doesn't change. The shield basically goes from front or back depending on what you're using. And with the spear weapon, we're on axe. Are we on axe or are we on spear? We're on spear. So with the spear, the bonuses are the same, which is interesting. I don't think that should be the case. Yeah, hard to believe the bonus would be the same for both weapon type against the bonus against axe and swords. But apparently it is. A little bit odd. Ah, the Magi. Yes, I mentioned. Fan of the Mommy movie, the original one, way back. And we have 30 armor, high morale, 70, that's the highest we have seen so far. And they also can boost themselves by another 20. This is what the game meant by lasting to the end with your slightly more vulnerable units, because they can keep their morale up high despite the low armor. But that just means they will die in mass. They also give encourage. They have a very strong weapon, of course, good charge, excellent charge, pretty fast, and the highlight is not only high morale, but very high melee attack and very high melee defense. These guys can actually pack a punch, I think. This is probably the most offensively capable unit that we have seen so far. 15 against large, 5 points against heroes as well. Every little bit helps. Then the Shurden Warriors. So these would be our sword user. They have recovery or battlefield healing. This might only be a thing for Truth Behind the Myth. I think on historical this is not a skill, but I could be wrong because I haven't actually got around to play a historical mode yet. Immune to flanking, so no drop in their melee defense even if they're flanked. No drop in their morale if they're flanked. 60 armor. 75% shield. These are legit defensive units. Still decent speed, very good melee attack, very good melee defense. High damage with bonus to spearmen, 5 points. Decent charge, also carries a couple javelins, very high damaging javelins actually, 45. And decent range on those. And now we're going to our range options, starting back with our cheapest with the Egyptian slingers. 160 range, slingers typically outrange archer units, so this is pretty low actually for slingers. Damage is really low, and aside from having slightly decent morale and speed, there is really nothing to speak of here for these units. Then Ethiopian hunters, which are javelin units, the damage is a little bit better. We can also boost our morale. Once we go into hand-to-hand combat, it doesn't look good. I think these low-end range units are not going to be very strong options. Then we have an upgraded variant, Ethiopian Javelin Men, and we're looking at 40 damage now. This is better. Still have our Leader's Will. It's understandable they will have, low armor here. They do have a small shield to help them trade fire. In melee, once again, not really good. You kind of want to just stay in the range game with these guys. 40 armor piercing, it's respectable. The Ethiopian archers, actually decent damage. Range is a bit on the low end for archer units. I think usually you can see up to 150. We're only 130. Ammo is good. Damage is okay. I mean, this is kind of acceptable at this point, but still, only thing we have is Vanguard deployment on top of that.
Slings ready.
Then we have Emamite Stone Slingers, and these are excellent slingers actually. 190 range with 55 damage, finally something good. They also have Encourage, pretty decent ammo, and the weapon damage is actually quite high, even though the melee attack defense is really nothing to mail home about, but the range is very impressive with very high damage. So maybe the slinger meta is back. Used to be very good to just run a lot of slingers. They nerfed it a bit, but this damage looks quite promising. Then Archers of Wawat, and we have 170 range archer, so finally some longer range archer. Actually quite long range. 170 is pretty decent for archers. And the damage is okay. Not too high, but the melee combat stats much better. So these guys can fight back if they do get caught. We're looking at 25 armor, 60 morale, 40 melee attack, 38 melee defense, and 107. Plus the extra last stand ability as well, leader's will. Egyptian archers. So let's see, 170, 45. So slightly better than the Wawat archers. The melee capability, damage-wise is better, but melee attack and melee defense is a little bit worse, a little bit less speed, but much more armor. So I guess they will still do better. They also have a bonus against spearmen. What did they use to get a bonus against spearmen? Oh, the Egyptian curved blade. Okay. Alright, so I guess that weapon has a bonus against spearmen. Alright, and that sums up all the range units. The couple at the end, especially starting with these slingers, are much more viable. These actually can double duty as a lot of infantry options. Pretty good stats. Then looking at the chariots, we have the Mari Anu, and these have 72 speed. They're a heavy chariot with 72 speed, which is actually quite high. They don't have any range. They're basically all charge, all damage. Very high armor. Actually, just pretty impressed with their speed. But no extra stats, no extra traits. A light chariot, 95. Light Synod chariot. These have the, I think, archers, or yeah, they have the archers. Pretty high damage, but the thing with most chariot archer is you just don't have that many archers shooting, right? Compared to like 60 some guys, you have 8 or 9 dishing out damage. So you're still going to rely a lot on the charge most of the time. Harassing, kiting around does help, but it's not going to put the hurt in the enemy. But the high damage does make up for some of it. Then we have another, the heavier, I guess the medium version. This is the light, and this is just the regular Sinew archers. And we're looking at pretty much the same unit. The same men are on fancier chariots. So the range damage component, 75, 120 versus 65. So we get 10 extra damage. And the charge goes to 44 from 35. Damage goes to 88 from 82. Yeah, you can see the improvements. The only thing that drops is the speed. We're dropping 15 speed with the slightly heavier variant, but a lot more health. Wow, a lot more health. Double health, almost. Yeah, 3,000 different, and this one's only 4,600. That's actually quite a bit. So that's a nice boost, and that's going to be our last unit. It's not a very big roster, and it's honestly a lot of light units. It kind of makes sense, because most of the Bronze Age Egyptian warfare we know and see don't have heavy armor. Part of that is climate, part of it's bronze working. But regardless, we're going to have I don't know actually, fast. So I think you have to flank with these armies, especially some of your earlier unit with their speed. You have to use that to your advantage, trying to reduce the enemy stats. You don't have that much stat going on for your army, so that's a bit concerning. If you end up playing the historical mode without any of the mythical units at all, and this is your only roster, that could become a bit concerning actually. Like you have to save up on certain units. Like your higher quality units are serviceable, but compared to some of the higher tier units available to the other factions, I still think the roster is generally a bit weak actually. So we'll see how this works out, especially if we end up playing as Memnon, but we'll see. As I said, there will be a poll on the channel for the community tab, so if you're interested in watching our Troy Let's Play when the game launches on the 14th, definitely come back and give us a watch. For the time being, this is going to end our overview. Hope you guys enjoyed these overview for both of these factions. If you haven't seen Rhesus, it's out already. Go check it out on the channel. And see you guys on the 14th when the game officially launches. Until then, bye!